A man walks alone through the narrow streets of Jerusalem. His cloak clings to him, soaked from the rain. Each step splashes against puddles formed in the cracks of ancient stone. In his hand, a small leather pouch. It jingles faintly with the sound of silver. 30 coins, 30 promises, 30 regrets waiting to be born. He pauses beneath the shadow of an olive tree, the same tree where his heart began to die. His eyes dart through the darkness, searching for something, or maybe trying to hide from everything. They said his name meant praise, but tonight it would mean betrayal. Judas Iscariot, the name that would echo through centuries. The name that would become a warning to every soul tempted by the glimmer of greed. But once he wasn't a villain. Once he was chosen. It began years earlier on the shores of Galilee. The air was warm, filled with the scent of salt and fish. Crowds gathered as a man spoke, his voice calm yet thunderous, gentle yet unshakable. Jesus of Nazareth. He looked into the hearts of men and saw purpose where others saw nothing. Fishermen became apostles. Outcasts became disciples. And among them, Judas stood tall, intelligent, charismatic, trusted. He held the money bag, the treasury of their small group. The others saw him as responsible, disciplined, a man who could be counted on. And for a time, he was. He watched miracles unfold before his eyes. Blind men seeing light for the first time, broken bodies made whole, dead hearts beating again. Judas smiled with the rest. But deep inside, a small voice whispered, "You deserve more." Every day Jesus spoke of the kingdom of heaven, but Judas dreamed of an earthly kingdom, one with power, riches, and glory. He followed Jesus not just out of faith, but out of expectation. He believed this Messiah would overthrow Rome, that he would rise as king, and Judas, his trusted friend, would stand at his side in triumph. But Jesus talked of humility, of giving, not gaining, of losing one's life to find it. To Judas, those words felt like chains around his ambition. Each time a woman poured perfume at Jesus' feet, Judas saw waste. Each time Jesus gave freely to the poor, Judas felt the weight of coins slipping away. Each time crowds praised Jesus, Judas wondered when his own name would be known. The seed of greed had been planted, and it began to grow in silence. Then came the moment that changed everything. A dinner in Bethany. The scent of pure nard filled the room as Mary broke an alabaster jar and poured it over Jesus' feet. The oil glistened under the lamplight, worth a year's wages. The disciples gasped. Judas spoke first. This perfume could have been sold and the money given to the poor. But deep down, he didn't care for the poor. His hand often dipped into the bag when no one was looking. Jesus looked at him, not with anger, but with sorrow. "Leave her alone. She has done a beautiful thing for me." And in that moment, Judas felt exposed, seen, caught. The voice of greed turned sharper. "You've wasted your life following him." That night, Judas slipped away into the darkness, toward the temple, toward the priests, toward a deal that would mark history forever. "What will you give me if I hand him over to you?" he asked. They looked at one another, smirking. 30 pieces of silver clinked onto the table. Judas hesitated only for a second, before his hand closed around them. And just like that, a price was placed on the Son of God. The rain poured harder that night. The silver burned cold in his palm. Somewhere in the distance, Jesus prayed under the olive trees of Gethsemane, his heart heavy, his spirit breaking, and Judas walked toward him. The garden was silent, except for the whisper of wind through olive leaves. Torches flickered in the distance, tiny flames dancing against the darkness, and leading them was Judas. His steps slowed as he entered the garden. He could see the familiar figure kneeling, praying, The same hands that had healed the sick were now trembling. The same eyes that had seen eternity now filled with sorrow. Jesus looked up. Their eyes met. No words were needed. Judas felt his throat tighten. The silver coins weighed heavy against his chest. The soldiers behind him waited for a signal. He walked closer, forcing a smile. "Rabbi," he whispered, voice breaking, and then a kiss, the kind of kiss that ends everything. Jesus' voice was calm. "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" The torches flared brighter. Soldiers stepped forward, seizing Jesus. The other disciples scattered into the darkness, hearts pounding, faith trembling. And Judas just stood there, watching. The man who had raised the dead now bound in ropes. The man who had calmed storms now led away by men. He told himself it was supposed to be different, that maybe this would force Jesus to reveal his power, to summon angels, to finally take his throne. But Jesus said nothing, only silence, only surrender. And suddenly, Judas understood what he had done. The next morning, Jerusalem was alive with noise. The priests celebrated in secret. The crowd gathered, curious and restless. Jesus stood before Pilate, beaten and bruised, and Judas watched from afar. The coins he once cherished now felt like poison. He clutched the pouch tightly, his palms sweating, his heart racing. Every sound of a hammer in the city echoed like judgment. Every clang of a coin like thunder in his ears. He tried to silence the guilt, tried to convince himself it was just politics, just a misunderstanding. But deep inside, a voice whispered, "You sold innocence. You betrayed love." He couldn't bear it. He ran to the temple, the same place where greed had begun. The priests looked up as he stormed in, his face pale, eyes red. "I have sinned," he cried. "I have betrayed innocent blood." They stared coldly, unmoved. "What is that to us? That's your responsibility." The words sliced through him. Judas threw the silver onto the temple floor. The coins scattered, ringing out like the sound of chains breaking. Too late. He ran out, gasping for air, desperate to escape the noise, the guilt, the memory. But guilt has a voice that never stops whispering. He stumbled through the streets, past the same people who once followed Jesus, past children who laughed unaware, past doors that closed as he passed. Every step felt heavier, every breath sharper. In the distance, the hill rose, the same hill where Jesus would soon carry his cross. But Judas turned away. He couldn't watch redemption unfold while drowning in regret. He found himself in a field just outside the city, a lonely place, a place where silence screamed louder than words. He fell to his knees, gripping the earth. How did it come to this? He remembered the miracles, the laughter around the fire, the way Jesus had looked at him, not with suspicion, but with love. He remembered when Jesus washed his feet, knowing what he would do, still choosing kindness, still choosing love. And now that love haunted him more than any sin could. He cried until he had no voice left, until the dawn began to break, until he could no longer bear the weight of what he'd done. If this story has reached your heart, take a moment, pause, breathe, because this next part reveals something few have ever truly seen. At that same moment, as the world began to wake, Jesus was led toward Golgotha. The crowd shouted, soldiers mocked, but he looked heavenward, his face calm despite the pain. He carried the weight of betrayal, of lies, of greed, of Judas. And somewhere in that final walk, in the pain and the blood and the crown of thorns, grace was already reaching for the one who had betrayed him. The sky darkened over Jerusalem. Clouds gathered like judgment itself. Lightning flashed across the horizon as Jesus hung upon the cross. The earth trembled, the veil tore, and heaven itself seemed to weep. And somewhere beyond the city walls, Judas's body swayed in silence. The man who traded eternity for silver was gone. But his story wasn't over. Because the lesson of Judas isn't just about betrayal. It's about the quiet hunger that lives inside all of us. The hunger for more success, more comfort, more power. It starts as a whisper, small, harmless, a thought that says, if I just had this, then I'd be happy. But greed never stops at just this. It always wants more. Judas didn't wake up one morning planning to betray the Son of God. He drifted there. One selfish thought, one hidden compromise at a time, until the glow of silver blinded him to the light of the Savior standing right in front of him. And that's the dark side of greed. It promises control, but ends in chains. It promises gain, but ends in emptiness. It promises happiness, but steals peace from the soul. Days passed. The tomb was sealed. Hope seemed lost. But then, a sound, a shout, a rumor spreading through the streets like fire. He is alive. Jesus had risen. The grave couldn't hold him. Death couldn't silence him. Even as Judas's story ended in despair, Jesus' story conquered it. Because grace doesn't end at the point of failure. It begins there. If Judas had waited one more day, if he had seen the sunrise over the empty tomb, he would have known. There was forgiveness even for him. And that's the haunting beauty of this story. Jesus knew Judas would betray him and still called him friend, still washed his feet, still shared bread with him. That is love beyond human understanding. A love that doesn't just forgive the mistake, it dies for the one who made it. Think about that. How many times have we chosen silver over the sacred? How often have we traded faith for comfort, conviction for convenience? Maybe not with coins, maybe with choices, maybe with silence when we should have spoken, or with pride when we should have forgiven. And yet, grace still whispers, "Come home." That's the heart of the Judas lesson. Not that greed destroys, but that love still pursues even after destruction. If you've ever felt like you've gone too far, like God could never forgive you, remember Judas's story, and remember what came after. Because the cross wasn't just for Peter, or John, or Mary. It was for the betrayer too. Maybe that's why this story still breaks hearts today. It's not just about ancient silver. It's about modern souls. It's about the worker who sacrifices family for a paycheck, the leader who trades integrity for applause, the heart that chases what shines and forgets what's sacred. But no matter how dark it gets, there's still light waiting. A light that doesn't shame, it redeems. A Savior who still whispers, "Friend, I knew, and I love you still." If this story stirred something inside you, if it reminded you of the battles you've faced between greed and grace, dawn to let it fade when the video ends. Share it with someone who might need to hear it, because you never know who's standing at the edge of despair, thinking their story is over. And before you go, pause for a moment. Look at your hands. Are you holding silver or surrender? Because in the end, every soul must make the same choice Judas did, to chase what glitters or to kneel before what's eternal. The dark side of greed ends in emptiness, but the light of grace begins with a single word, forgiven. So stay. Walk with us in the next story, where betrayal meets mercy again, and discover how even the darkest heart can still find redemption, because this is not the end.